for survivors in particular, it's remembering that you did not cause this. You did not bring this on yourself. You are not to blame for the abuse and the violence that you experienced, and that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of a healthy relationship, that you are courageous, that you can have confidence in yourself, that you can accomplish your big goals and your big dreams.
Good morning, everyone. It's awesome to see all of you again and great to be together. And been excited for a while to spend time with Courtney Thomas. We were actually supposed to meet up a month or so ago, and then I can't even remember why that didn't happen, but this was still happening. And so I've been excited about this. And I don't know, met Courtney a few years ago, and really everyone in Kansas City is able to follow her work because she does so much work in the community. You've just got so many awesome positive things going on. I've been excited to talk about that and hear about those. So thanks for coming and joining us, Courtney.
Thank you for having me, Randy. It's a pleasure to be here.
I want to go back because really, if I look at your career, your whole career has been really a life of service. We'll get into what you're doing at Newhouse, but Newhouse is just one more of so many things you've been doing. And so what led to that life of service? Where'd you grow up? Who were your early influences? And when did you really catch that spark that you said, I want to dedicate myself to helping others?
Well, I had a great role model in my grandmother. So I'm a North Carolina girl. I've lost my accent quite a bit. So when I first moved to Kansas City almost 20 years ago, people would say to me, "Where are you from?" And I will never forget leading a volunteer training class. Someone said, there's this juice that people drink, and I'm not gonna say it. I want you to say it. It's Fivealive. Five Alive. So with the Southern twang. So I've been in Kansas City now for 20 years, but my grandmother raised me, and I always considered her my mom. And she modeled what service to community, service to others looks like, always thinking about other people. How can I help? So at a very young age, I was able to see that work in action. And it's in my DNA. It's in my DNA to serve community, help people become the best possible versions of themselves, to lean in to where there are gaps in our community and help to create solutions so that we can all live better lives. My career path is really interesting. I am an accountant by education, so that's my degree is in accounting, and I have this nonlinear path that goes like this: from finance to animals to leadership development for women to domestic violence service in our community. So it's a very untraditional path, but the majority of my career has been spent in business turnaround. So working with nonprofits that are doing incredible work, but are on the brink of needing to decide which path they're going to take. And it's really been a pleasure and an honor to be recruited into some of these organizations that are ready for innovation. They're ready for growth and transformation, and the next phase of success in creating impact in community.
There's a lot that I've seen you do that impacts kids, but I'm assuming some of this idea of service and life of service started even when you were a student. What were some of those early experiences you had that it really helped you catch fire for helping others before it became a career?
Yeah, I mean, I remember being in elementary school, and I think just because my childhood, my life was different than the traditional child's pathway, that I always just had this connection to people that I felt maybe weren't being treated or acknowledged or um, represented. And so at a very early age, I just would always find myself, if I look around the room and I saw someone who was sitting alone or kids weren't playing with on the playground, that's where I wanted to go. That's where I wanted to devote my attention to helping, people really feel like they belong. Because as a childhood survivor of domestic violence, my mom was also addicted to alcohol and other things. And so my childhood was a place where I spent a lot of time in fight or flight mode. And I think I operated off of adrenaline all the time, and so that has become just part of my makeup, is my mind is always thinking about, okay, what's next and how can I make it better? And you're kind of in survival mode. And I think that is how I have, when I look at people, when I look at community, when I look at opportunities, it's how do I help someone see the bright light that I see inside of them? I remember the homeless community in the town where I grew up, which is Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and outside the grocery store, there were always homeless folks that were sitting there waiting for someone to either help them with food or provide them with money. And sometimes people dissuade their children from interacting with, I'm going to say, people like that for safety reasons, or you just don't know what their mental state is or whatnot. But every time we would come out of the grocery store, my grandmother would hand me coins or dollar bills that I could hand to the folks that were in need outside of the community. Never once did she say they're different than we are. Never once did she say, don't talk to them, don't be exposed to them, don't go near them. Never once did she say that. It was always about, we have an opportunity to help someone, and we're in a place to do that. And so we should. And I think that is just carried on with me throughout my life. I volunteered at a nursing home when I was in middle school. So I would go and spend time with people that didn't have family who were coming to visit them. And you talk about heartbreak, just imagining. And I think for all of us who are on this call, we're kind of in this middle-aged space, and we're thinking about what is life like for us when perhaps someone has to help with our care, and being able to support them and make them feel loved was one of my greatest blessings. And I have a picture of one of the women that I spent a lot of time with, and she was deaf. And so she taught me a little bit of sign language. I can't say that I was a master at it, but just being able to communicate with Emmy was really special. And then my passion turned to animals. So as I was finishing up my accounting degree, I said to my grandmother, I really want to go to vet school. And that was in my senior year. And she said, well, you better get that accounting degree first. And then if you want to go and practice veterinary medicine, you can go back to school. I didn't go that path in terms of going back to school, but what I did have the privilege to do was run veterinary hospitals in North Carolina and help them become more profitable, more customer-centric. Veterinarians are great at helping animals and serving animals, but leadership skills and business growth skills are not things that they spend a ton of time teaching about in veterinary school. So that was really a privilege and an honor to take that passion that I have for animals and then be able to apply my educational background and expertise to help organizations and people grow. And that's what led me to Kansas City. I came to visit a friend, and at the time I was managing one of the largest hospitals in North Carolina, and I was also running a nonprofit group called the Animal Adoption and Rescue Foundation. It was all volunteer based, but I was running all elements of that operation. It was a full-time job on top of a full-time job. And when I came to Kansas City, I told my friend, you've got to take me to the place to get my animal fix. And he took me to Wayside Waifs, and I'll never forget driving up that long driveway on that 44-acre campus and thinking, oh my gosh, I have to work there. And it just so happened that they had a opening for a vice president, chief operating officer role. I was 25, and I said to myself, everything about this job is all the things I love to do, but are they going to notice me? Am I going to be acknowledged if I send in my resume and apply for this job? And I did it anyway. I sent in my application. I was the first person they interviewed. They narrowed the position down to 2 candidates. I was one of them. They chose a woman that had 30 years of experience in the field. Made total sense, to me at the time. And they called me 2 weeks later and said, we really want to figure out a way to get you here. And we have a different position that's open, leading our volunteer program and our public relations and special events. Would you be interested in doing that work? So I said yes and moved halfway across the country in 2 weeks, not knowing exactly where I was going to live, or had 5 dogs at the time, and just made it work. And about 10 months into my role, they determined that the person that they'd hired for the chief operating officer role wasn't the best fit. And I was able to attain my dream job within the organization and really transform their entire business operation, put them on the national map as an industry leader, and had the privilege to work under one of the most amazing leaders of my entire career, who gave me freedom and autonomy to dream big, dream bold, and then bring that big vision to life. And it really changed the landscape for Wayside Waifs and for animal welfare in general in the Kansas City metro.
That's a pretty young age to figure out what a lot of people spend their career figuring out, is how to weave purpose into their job. And it sounds like you just saw your purpose, weaved it into your job, but there was a lot of courage to head off across the country to someplace new. Where do you think that came from to do that?
I still ask myself that question every day, Randy, because my grandmother was just the center core of my being. And imagining ever being without her was something that I thought I could never move away. I could never move away. The trauma that I experienced with my mom carried from my childhood into my adulthood. And at the time I was considering making the move, she was in a really tough space. And I always had to be the adult with her. At 13, I was her designated driver, and I was always the one that had to play adult. And so it was really interesting when I told my grandmother about this opportunity. She said, "You have to go. You have to go." And having her endorsement and her courage to be without me, I think gave me the courage to be without her physically. But she came to visit a lot. Sorry, I get emotional. She passed away last year, so still a little bit raw, but she's the person who gave me the courage to do the things that I do. And she was always my biggest cheerleader. And there's this quote, and I apologize, I can't remember whose quote it is. It's not mine, but it says something like, a leader's courage to fulfill their vision comes from their passion, not from their position. And I think that's where that's the place that I've always led from, is that authentic space where people can see and feel my passion. I don't give part of myself to something. I give all of myself to something. And I think that has helped other people find their footing and find their courage, and is, seeing me as a leader, as a human. I'm not perfect. I make mistakes. I show up as my authentic self every day. I'm very transparent with people, never want there to be surprises. And it's building a culture where people feel like they can also be themselves is really what drives success within an organization. Culture is your thermometer to success, in my opinion, not your P&L results. If your culture is right within an organization, your P&L is going to be right on target too.
In an early life filled with some adversity and some challenges, you found someone who was on your side, in your grandmother, and an advocate and a supporter. It sounds like that made all the difference. How has that defined how you help others in the roles you've played in helping others who are dealing with their own challenges, their own adversity, their own trauma? Talk about the importance of having someone on your side.
Oh gosh, it makes all the difference in the world, because it's so easy just to get stuck in that space of not knowing, what to do or what direction. And so I think one of the things that I learned very early on in my life is I may not be in control of the things that have happened around me or have happened to me, but I am in control of how I respond to that. And I am in control of what happens next. And so I always think about that um, in every avenue of my life. So not just my career, but every avenue of my life. That, okay, the only thing that I have control over is me. And how do I want to show up, and what do I want to do, and what do I want the outcome to be? And when I think about that, it drives me to a better place. I think my grandmother also taught me to look for the positive in things. And I would say I think I'm at a place right now in my life where I'm finding some balance in that. While generally speaking, looking for the positive is a good thing, sometimes you just need to sit with whatever it is. Sometimes you do need to sit with the negative. You need to sit with the feelings of pain. You need to sit with the feelings of fear. You need to become curious and explore some of those things. And curiosity was one of my words of intention a couple of years ago. And it was just giving myself permission to sit with some of those feelings from time to time instead of always trying to turn it into something positive. You need to, validate for yourself and validate for others what they're feeling. And I say this to my children, I say this to my coworkers, like, I want you to feel what you feel. Like, nobody is here to prescribe to you what that should be. Like, you're entitled to feel what you're feeling. And then let's talk about it. Like, let's talk through it and let's figure out what are our possible solutions, what are the outcomes that we are after. So remembering you're in control of what happens next, trying your best to stay positive, but not ignoring the other things that you're feeling. Because if you ignore them, they're going to show up in other ways. I mean, that's just the reality. If you try to push them aside, if you try to push them down, and sometimes those feelings, it takes a while for them to show up, especially if you've experienced something big in your life. My grandmother, April 26th will be the year anniversary of her passing. And I can say, I mean, I haven't been ready to deal with some of that yet. And in some ways, I haven't had the opportunity to either. And so I think just being patient with yourself and remembering that all of us are a work in progress every day. We have an obligation, and that may not be the right word to use, but I'm just going to stick with it for a minute. But we have an obligation to keep learning and to keep experiencing. And I mean, everybody on this call has heard it before and heard it many times. Leadership isn't a destination, it's a journey. And so is your personal growth and development. And every day, the things that you experience, the people that you come in contact with, you interact with, you have something to learn about them, but they teach you something about you too. And so giving yourself time and space to absorb that helps you be better prepared to give gifts away to other people. I was talking to Dr. Michelle Robin yesterday, and we were talking about being still, like the power of stillness. And, what does that look like in your life, and how does that show up for you? And I think one of the things I was sharing with her is I think there's a misconception that being still means you literally are being still. You're not moving, you're just sitting in a space and you're being quiet. But being still with yourself is unique. Your stillness could be taking a walk. Your stillness could be watching a TV show. Your stillness could be just sitting and staring out the window, but finding time for yourself to just decompress and unplug and unwind is so powerful, because that's where your clarity comes from. That's where you become really clear on the power of you and what you want to do next, or how you want to solve a problem, or where you want to invest your time and your energy. And when you can do that, and you can get that clarity, and you can make those commitments to yourself, then you can give a better version of yourself to other people, your family, your children, your coworkers, your friends, and I would say for me in my life, just based on my experiences, that was always tough for me. Uh, Slowing down, calming down, being still was so uncomfortable for me. And I think I just learned how to do that literally in 2020 during the pandemic, like because we were kind of forced to in some ways, right? And I had never ever mastered that. Like the thought of sitting on the couch and watching TV. I mean, I couldn't tell you that a time that I did that outside of being a child until the pandemic hit, like never. And I know that's a silly example, but Netflix has been my unplug and my still. Um, having never watched Netflix before until the pandemic hit, it's like, oh wow, like you can just kind of release your mind and watch some show like Outlander or Virgin River or whatever your thing is, and kind of really unplug. And so as leaders, I don't think that we do enough of that. I don't think that we give ourselves enough grace to take a break, to back up, to pause for a minute. And what I would say about that is your people are watching you, and what you model is what they believe you expect them to deliver. And so when they can see you being very intentional about taking time for yourself, then they give themselves permission to do the same thing. And we all, I think, want to focus on retention and satisfaction and all of the things that help our organizations perform at their peak level. And taking care of yourself and taking care of your people is pivotal to that.
I'm glad you brought up the conversation with Dr. Michelle, because I listened to that and I thought that was awesome. And it's hard because this thing keeps us from being still, because we're being bombarded constantly with interactions. There's actually a lot of science I've read lately that just sitting watching TV is better for us than being on this, because it's passive. And this is so interactive. Our brain is overstimulated till 2 a.m. because we're sitting there doing social media and texting and reading people's messages. And so it's hard for us. How much in your work with folks who are struggling do you find tied to being sucked into social media and their phones and their texting and all that interactivity? It just creates, overactivity in your mind. You never get a chance to be still. You never get a chance to rest.
Absolutely. Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Randy. The stimulation piece is huge. And we're just constantly, and certainly the people that we are serving at Newhouse have a lot of stimulation in their lives, and the inability to kind of step away from that. Do you want me to talk a little bit about Newhouse now, or
let's do that. Let's go to Newhouse.
Okay. So Newhouse is Kansas City's first and oldest domestic violence shelter. We celebrated our 50-year anniversary last year. We provide emergency services to people of all genders, all races, all cultural and ethnic backgrounds who have experienced domestic violence in some way. I think statistically, people assign a label to survivors or victims of domestic violence as women, and actually that's not just the case. So 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience some form of domestic violence in their lifetime. And I'm so proud that Newhouse is there to provide critical services to people. There's only 342 beds for survivors of domestic violence in our community, and Newhouse provides 88 of those beds. So when people come to us, they are stepping out of danger, they're stepping into safety, and they're stepping into a circle of support or an ecosystem of transformative services that allow them to achieve safety, self-sufficiency, and ultimately whole person healing. We offer therapy services for children and adults. We provide support for folks that have substance use challenges. We also provide case management, transitional housing services, court advocacy if a person needs an order of protection, if they need help navigating a divorce or child custody situation. We have an on-staff attorney who will stand hand in hand and navigate those waters with you. We are also the only shelter that has an on-site early education center that provides full-time educational support and services to children birth through age 5. And we also have an a educational innovation center for children kindergarten through high school. We have a trauma-informed classroom. We practice conscious discipline and creative curriculum. So children who have experienced significant or complex trauma in their lives can be in a space where they feel comfortable, where they can show up as themselves, where they can be better understood. One of the greatest failures in our education system is the lack of investment that is made in teachers to recognize and understand trauma, how it shows up for children, and how to respond to them. So oftentimes those children are labeled as disruptive in class, uninterested in learning, that they have attention-seeking disorder or behaviors. They're misdiagnosed in a number of ways because people don't understand how trauma shows up. So our investment in children and our education programs is one of the things I am most proud of at Newhouse. Having been a child that grew up in that environment, I know what it meant to me to have someone who understood me, and that's what I want us to be known best for at Newhouse. That's what I want our legacy to be. I don't want to do it like everybody's done it for the last 40 years. So this industry has only been alive or accepted, talked about in mainstream for the last 40 years. And you heard me say we've been around for 50 years. So we started as a food pantry and a clothing pantry for people that were experiencing abuse. And then later, about 9 years later, then opened up our first home where people could come and live in safety who had experienced abuse. But my leadership style is one of innovation. I don't want anybody to tell me what can't be done, because I'm going to tell you 25 ways we can do it, and then I'm going to show you how we make it happen. And for the domestic violence industry, as a whole, I think the attention has really been centered around how do we get the person out of danger and into a safe place, and how do we provide them therapy. But then there's just this recidivism that happens because we aren't getting to the root of the problem. And that's my focus. And we at Newhouse are going to be soon launching what's called a community activation team to focus on our bigger vision, which is to solve the problems that are at the groundwater level within our community, or be a part of the solution. We can't solve them on our own, but we want to raise attention to and be part of the solution to solve the groundwater issues that feed the cycle of abuse. So that is domestic violence, the social determinants of health, and the lack of access and equity that people have to receive those services. It's the systemic racism that exists in our community. It is the lack of transportation, child care, job readiness skills. If we aren't focusing on all of those things, then we simply are putting a Band-Aid on a bigger issue. So I want to step out of how domestic violence has been done traditionally, and I want to step into how we solve a bigger community problem that not only impacts the work we do at Newhouse, but it impacts every other social service agency in the metro. And most importantly, those of you that are operationally inclined, like operations is my happy place. There's such inefficiencies in our social services system. It's broken, and we cast people from agency to agency and place to place, and we re-traumatize people by forcing them to retell their story over and over and over again to receive services at a variety of organizations. We have to stop that. We have to stop doing that for a variety of reasons. One, it's not good for the person who needs service. Number two, it's a waste of time, which is a waste of money. And when we're wasting time and we're wasting money, then we can't help as many people who need us. And to put some numbers behind that, in Missouri in 2020, there were 30,000, just over 30,000 people in our state who received domestic violence support and services. Yet there were 26,000 people who reached out for help and were told no because shelters were full and resources didn't exist. So when you think about the people that were helped, near equals the number of people who still were in need, there's a problem. There's a problem there, and we've got to figure out how to solve that. And so that's my personal mission, and helping people understand that domestic violence is not just about the bruises and the broken bones that you can see from the outside. Domestic violence breaks families. It breaks communities. There's so much that happens on the inside for people, from emotional abuse to financial abuse, sexual abuse, things that you can't see with your own two eyes, but they impact people, they impact communities. And for people that may say, well, domestic violence hasn't impacted me or doesn't impact me, it does. You just don't know it. I think I gave that statistic early on. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men will experience domestic violence of some kind in their lifetime. So that means it's you or it's somebody that you know. And if you just don't know them yet, let me tell you about the community impact of domestic violence. So domestic violence costs our country over $8 billion a year in lost productivity. So if you don't care, or I shouldn't say don't care, because I think we all care and don't want to see a person suffer. But if you don't feel like domestic violence has really impacted you closely, but you're a business owner or you're a business leader or a community investor, it is impacting the community and the bottom line of the community, if you will. And survivors lose about 8 million days of work. So $8 billion, 8 million days lost at work. And I think people have to have a different perspective. When you see an empty seat at work, when you see an empty seat in the classroom, you need to start asking yourself the question, what might be going on at home? What may be going on in that person's life that is preventing them from showing up? And I'm happy that we are here. I'm happy to have been part of the transformation and revitalization of Newhouse. As the oldest domestic violence shelter, we weren't very well known in the community. I started my role there 75 days before the pandemic hit. Not one single person, including myself, had a company issued laptop at the time. There had never been virtual therapy happening. And in fact, that was, considered just not in alignment with the social services or therapeutic practices. And so while COVID brought about many bad and harmful things, it also brought about some really great things too, to our industry in particular, opening up the door of opportunity to do some things virtually and provide a higher level of support that way. And it creates better balance or harmony for our teammates too. So if we have a person in crisis in the middle of the night, our therapists historically would have to come in the middle of the night and meet that person's need. But now we have a stopgap option that we can first have a video interaction with them to see if we can help bring them back to a center point. And if not, then of course our therapists are available and are there to do whatever we need. But we're a 24-hour operation. Domestic violence never ever takes a break, whether there's a pandemic happening, whether there's a snowstorm happening, never takes a break, and neither does Newhouse. So I'm really proud to be a part of that organization.
You said something about we might think we're not affected, and yet there are people all around us that we might look at and assume their life is perfect, and it wasn't or isn't. I mean, you shared some things about your childhood, but if you didn't, we all might look at you and say, well, Courtney's life's always been perfect, and you just never know those things. How do we be how do we create an environment that's more comfortable for people to tell us about their struggles and the trauma they face? And it may go back to when they were a baby, it may be when they were a teenager, it may be in their relationship. But if we just look at people and judge and assume we know what's going on in their life, we're probably wrong, I would assume.
Yeah, you really bring up a great point, Randy, and that you asked that question. I don't I don't think enough people have yet gotten comfortable kind of with their own selves, sometimes to be able to really explore where others are. But that, I do think that that's another positive that came from COVID, is people were talking about how they were feeling and what they were experiencing, which really did open up doors of deeper conversation. So I would say, you know, just being authentic with who you are, and when the time is right and when it's appropriate, being able to share those little nuggets makes you more human to people. I mean, you hit the nail on the head with your comment that people look at me and think, oh, I got it all together. And I am proud to say I do have it together, but that doesn't mean that I haven't experienced many ripples and speed bumps and barriers in my lifetime. And people have said that to me before. Oh gosh, you look, you always show up all put together and this and that. And I'm thankful that maybe I project that, but at the same time, I want people to see me as a human just as they are. And as leaders, when we can show up that way and people can see us that way, they feel more comfortable showing up and being themselves too. And one of the ways that we do that, and we focus on that at Newhouse, and I've done in other organizations, is we make intentional time for connection, where we share stories, and whether it's your team meetings or whether it's your staff meetings, doing something that is very intentional that allows you to get to know a person more or at a different level than your daily interactions with them, opens up those doors and starts making those important conversations happen. And sometimes you can use your social media platform. So while we are all addicted to our phones and social media and what's the next notification, what's the next thing I've got to do, which busy is a drug that we're all addicted to, and we need to figure out how to let go of some of that. But you can use your social platforms to start to introduce some vulnerabilities and some topics that maybe you don't own. Like maybe it's not yours, maybe you haven't experienced it, but just sharing, hey, I read this thing, or I met this person, or I have this question that I'm just thinking about, invites people to start exploring on their own or sharing comments on your page. And it's just inviting conversation and meeting people where they are. And that's the key. I mean, even in our work and as trauma experts, there's not a way that we can make everybody open up or make them talk about, their experiences. People have to do it when they're ready and how they're ready. And so I just think if we can all imagine ourselves as kind of an incubator of authenticity and an incubator and an encourager of people just being more themselves, that those conversations happen organically and give us an opportunity to share our own story with somebody that helps make a difference in their lives. Because you never know. I mean, that's the thing. You don't know what someone is experiencing or what they have experienced. And we talk a lot in leadership about assuming positive intent. I'm coaching a lot of people around that right now, assuming positive intent. And so I just carry that kind of to a different place, which is, if people are showing up solid with a smile on their face, we're assuming that everything is okay, but giving some space and freedom for people to not be okay. One of the things I did last year in December is, as the holiday gift. So whatever holiday people celebrate, or if they celebrate none, that's okay too. I still gave them this gift of 2 extra weeks of PTO because I really want people to be able to unplug and sit with themselves or be with their family or do something they love. And I think in organizations, in businesses, we're all focused on the bottom line and how we're growing and how we're going. But my gosh, if we can't focus on our people and helping them live their best lives and letting them live a life while they work, we are not leaders. That's my personal opinion. You're not leading. It's robotic. It's becoming robotic at that point. If we aren't allowing people to have a life and work, then we've become robots. And I want people to feel like when they come to work for me or with me, and it's not for me, it's with me. And I don't believe that while there's hierarchy in an org chart, I'm not the CEO and you're here. Because if we're not all here, we're going nowhere. So we've got to be here, and they have to see me as a support system to them, with them. I roll up my sleeves and will do anything that you need me to do to help you be successful or help the organization be successful. But I think I'm rambling now, but so I'll pause for a second.
If any of you have any questions, type in the chat. Are there things you guys teach to help people face these challenges and contemplate these challenges and get healthy around these challenges that we all could be doing? Is there journaling? Is there writing? Is there meditation? Is there healthy eating? What are the things that are the components of healing what you call those groundwater issues, addressing those groundwater issues that you think help people get into a better place that any of us could be doing to face the challenges in life?
Oh gosh, that is a great question. There are a variety of things. I love that you mentioned nutrition and exercise, because that is part of our bigger vision. We want to build a new campus. So our building is very old. It was built in the 60s. It's not really set up in such a way, nor can it be re-engineered to serve the purpose that I want it to. So our goal is to have a new campus eventually, where we are focusing on nutrition, and we're moving to that now in our current building with a scratch kitchen, and partnering with urban farmers and things like that, which gives back to community, but also gives the gift of greater health to the people that we serve. But the best advice that we give to our residents, and that I could share with each of you this morning, is whether it's 2 minutes, whether it's 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever you can put into your schedule for you, you've got to start doing that. You've got to start doing that. If it's just 2 minutes to be still, if it's 10 minutes to write down your to-do list so that you can be focused and feel more productive. Because when you feel more productive, then you show up in a better way. You feel more accomplished. You can actually rest at the end of the day. So journaling, exercising, are two of the things that we talk to our survivors most about, because if we can free their mind space of some of their basic needs, then they are ready to absorb the things that they hear about in therapy, and they can apply those things to their lives. But for survivors in particular, it's remembering that you did not cause this. You did not bring this on yourself. You are not to blame for the abuse and the violence that you experienced, and that you are worthy of love. You are worthy of a healthy relationship, that you are courageous, that you can have confidence in yourself, that you can accomplish your big goals and your big dreams. And I think even for those folks that haven't experienced abuse in their life, as leaders, we still have self-doubt from time to time. And so positive affirmations are so powerful, and it helps to flip the script. And meditation, that can be your form of meditation. So for me, like, meditation would be very hard, because sitting in silence and quiet is very hard for me. But when I can leverage affirmations to change the script in my head, it changes the whole outlook and the whole perception. So I think that is definitely a tool as well. But if I were to rewind just a little bit, I would say asking for help, talking to someone is a strength. It's definitely not a failure. It's definitely not a stigma. It's definitely not. And our society has painted that picture for so long that if you're in therapy, or you disclose that you have mental health challenges, that there's something different about you, there's something wrong with you, there's something, and really the strongest people are the people that can acknowledge that life is hard. Life is hard. The experiences that we've had in our lives are hard. The losses that we've had in our lives are hard. And, loss is literal loss. And loss is also the perception of losing someone or losing something. So it could be losing a job. It could be losing anything. The perception of loss is just as real as actual loss. And none of us can control when grief is going to show up in our lives. And when we can just be our authentic selves and say, you know what, I'm having a tough day today. My energy's a little bit off today. And I say that with my team. If I'm having a tough day, or I'm feeling just completely maxed out at my limit, jumping from meeting to meeting and thing to thing, and I have to walk into a meeting and I can recognize with myself that I'm not showing up as my best self, I just call it what it is and name it right out of the gate. Hey guys, I'm feeling like my energy's a little off today. So if you notice it, I want you to know I'm noticing it too. So I just believe the gift of transparency is the greatest gift we can give ourselves and the greatest gift that we can give others. And I think it goes back to answering your question, earlier, Randy, is how do we help people feel more comfortable about talking, is being transparent. Like being transparent is the invitation.
Let's go to Carolyn.
I get to ask it.
You do.
I get to ask it of my dear friend. Courtney, you know what I love about the organic evolution is that your love of animals led you to Wayside Waves, which brought you to Kansas City. I'd love for you to share a little bit of light on how so closely tied domestic violence is with animals. Get some clarity, because I don't think that folks realize the connection that often people will stay because there isn't a place for their pet, and they don't, 80% of the time abusers are going to also abuse the animal. So talk a little bit about that, because I think for what you do, you are the most perfect person who sees all of the connections that bring it together. And that's a component that I think that there's not enough noise around. So how do you navigate that? And knowing those two components, do you have a certain vision for the future that you'd like to see implemented more and more across the country?
Yeah. Oh, thanks for asking that question, Carolyn, because it's a big one, and one, you're right, that people really don't recognize. And what I didn't share is after Wayside Waves, I had the opportunity to lead to the merger of two organizations on the Kansas side to form Great Plains SPCA. So I spent over 20 years of my career in animal welfare and veterinary medicine. And to Carolyn's point, 72% of survivors say they would have left their abuser sooner if they'd had a place for their pets to go. So I started a program at Wayside Waves, our Families in Crisis program, where we would house the pets of domestic violence survivors for any of the shelters in the metro so that people could get to safety more quickly. We never want that to be a determinant of a person staying in a dangerous situation. 68% of people that enter shelters say that their abuser has used their pet as a threat or means of control over them, or have already caused harm or death to their animal. So people who, there are tons of studies, tons of research to indicate that people who abuse people often start by abusing animals. So when you experience someone who is cruel to pets, you can almost be guaranteed that later in their life, if not already, they are also abusing people. We brought in, when I was at Wayside Waifs, we did a conference, hosted a conference, and I brought in Frank Asconi, and I have this book back here somewhere, but which is the link between family violence and animal abuse, and did a seminar with law enforcement, judges, prosecutors, domestic violence agencies, because people don't often understand or see the connection. Having been in the animal welfare space, I also know about the healing and therapeutic benefits of pets. And Newhouse had traditionally not allowed or accepted animals into shelter because we don't have a separate kennel or a facility for animals. But I said, you know what? If they have pets that can be housed in their rooms and they get along with other people, bring them on. So we started accepting pets in 2020. Last year, there were 19 animals that were housed at Newhouse in addition to survivors. And those pets range from dogs and cats to guinea pigs and rabbits. So it was species of all kinds. But when we can allow pets and people to stay together, there's healing that happens there too. As part of our bigger model with our campus, we want to have an entrepreneurial arm where we are teaching survivors a skill that allows them to be prepared for the job market, help them to get a job. And there are a variety of ideas that we are kind of bouncing around at this point. And one of those is having a doggy daycare, boarding and grooming facility, and partnering with organizations like the Grooming Project, where several of our residents have gone for training to be groomers, but have that on our campus. And again, let it be a shared asset. So my interest is definitely to continue to advance Newhouse, but my greater and biggest interest and what I would consider success is creating a community asset. So I want our new campus to not be something that's just for Newhouse. Our intent is for it to be a community asset that could be shared across, multiple social services industries. And whether it's people from Hope Faith Campus that are interested in learning about a job, whether it's people from another domestic violence shelter, folks from Healing House, Helping House, Welcome House, wherever, that they can come and have access to gaining the skills they need to become self-sufficient.
That is awesome. Let's go to Dan.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Courtney. And I just posted this question in the chat. As you were sharing, I was struck by how many dualities there are, not only in your journey, but in your leadership role, right? So this just deeply personal, empathetic gift of your presence with someone. And yet at the same time, you're driving, the very next sentence, you're driving very long-term, systemic, innovative change through advocacy. So, you're operating in the deeply personal and the deeply strategic. You said operations are your happy place, but everything you're talking about is, very innovative and sort of disrupting social services. So maybe just speak to those, the deeply personal, and then the strategic, and perhaps even your own non-linear career journey has prepared you uniquely to operate with all these dualities. But maybe with us, just what are one or two things you're learning personally as a leader, as you lead with all these different mindsets and perspectives, probably throughout, even just a typical day?
It's a great question. One of the tools, and Katie's on this call too, so she can speak a little bit to this, but one of the greatest tools that I have learned about in my career is the value of a strengths assessment tool to help you get to know yourself as a leader. So your hardwiring as well as the hardwiring of your team. Then you can communicate better. You can be more effective in generating and creating outcomes. So I've used the predictive index tool for several years and love it. It helps me to understand how I need to show up in different settings with different people to make decisions or help them to feel comfortable with change, whatever that may be. I am a right brain and a left brain person. So every strengths assessment tool that I take has demonstrated that, which is a gift, and sometimes it can be a challenge as well, because you're trying to do so many things at one time. And when you move so fast, sometimes you lose people along the way. And I think that's one of the things that I've had to get comfortable with, and especially in our current evolution, we've shifted from first order change to second order change at Newhouse in 2 years. So it's not just a little bit of change, it's a lot of change that's happening. And you mentioned empathy and showing up with empathy. And so I'm going to be really vulnerable here with you all right now, to just talk about my observations in the social services space. And I really am answering your question, Dan, I promise. It's just maybe a little longer way to get there. What I've observed in the social services space is there's an opportunity to change what and how we are teaching people that choose to go into that profession. There are so many rigid structures and swim lanes that you must stay within this swim lane, and boundaries. And believe me, like, I am all about having some healthy boundaries, but you cannot connect with a person genuinely and authentically to influence and create change with them if you're saying, I'm going to help you, but I'm going to do it like this at an arm's length distance. You can't establish the level of trust that we really need people to have in us, to believe in us, to help them change and reshape their lives. And that's been one of the things I've had to get comfortable with in this role, is saying, you know what, I'm not a social worker. I don't have a master's in social work. I'm not a therapist, but I know how I want people to experience us, which has been very disruptive for people that have been in this field for a really long time, encouraging them to think about it differently. So literally yesterday, rolled out to the entire team our new philosophic operational pillars, which is, it's about connection before consequence, relationships over rules, and the practice of radical empathy. And if we aren't doing those things, nobody likes to be pointed back to policy. Well, the policy says, who cares? Like, I'm a woman of privilege, and I'm going to show up at the store and take back something that I just spent $200 on that's broken and doesn't work. And they're going to tell me, I'm sorry, it's not our policy. I'm going to go from 0 to 100 probably pretty quick in that space. And I'm not experiencing trauma in my life right now. Yet what I've observed in the social services system is we want people to jump through so many hoops and prove to us their worthiness to receive service, or that they're ready for service, or that is not the way. That's othering. That is othering. And here we talk about, we don't want to place stigma on people who have experienced trauma or needs, or have mental health needs, and treating them anyway less than a human and making it easy for them. I also blew people's minds the other day when I said, what's the worst thing that could happen if we just made it easy for people? I'm all about teaching people to fish. I'm all about modeling for them. But what if we stopped for 1 minute and thought that their time with us is perhaps the only time in their lives they've had it easy? What is the harm in us making it easy because social workers are taught, you don't solve the problem for the person. You give them the tools and you push them to solve the problem on their own. And when you are standing in trauma and complex trauma, and I'm going to give you a very direct example. A family, we've got there's a mom in the shelter, and she has 5 children that are between the ages of 12 and 3. She doesn't have time to stand there and be given all these tools to hopefully figure out the steps she needs to take to get her child a birth certificate that requires that she get on 4 different buses that take her to her destination, and it takes 6 hours of her day. How about if we just made it easy for her? Then could that open up her mind to be able to receive and accept the therapeutic tools that we are giving her? So I hope that I answered your question, but it part of it for me has just throughout my career is getting comfortable with the fact that when you're disrupting things and you are pushing people to innovate, that's not comfortable for everybody. Change, even when it's positive, isn't comfortable for many, many people. And in fact, I'm losing an employee whose last day is tomorrow, who I adore and love. She has been just an amazing asset to our organization, but she's a self-declared uncomfortable person that's uncomfortable in change. And that's okay. But you know what's so awesome is when she resigned, she handed me a candidate that she thought was excellent to fill her position. So I think that speaks volumes, not only to her personal integrity and her personal work ethic, but the value that she sees in our work, the value that she sees in the leadership of the organization, and the services that we are delivering. So I think sometimes as leaders, we view it as a failure when someone doesn't work out or something doesn't work out, or when you bring on certain people at the beginning of your evolution or your transformative stage. And I've said this many times, the people that you're bringing or that you need in the beginning of transformation are oftentimes not the same people that you need when you're hunting and growing and building, which sometimes are not the same people that you need when you are sustaining and continuing to innovate and evolve. And as a leader, getting okay with that is big and important. And we need to. It's not a failure. And looking back on the lessons that you were able to teach them along the way, or how they became better, how you became better, how the agency became better, that's a win. And you prepared somebody to go on to be successful, perhaps somewhere else. So I don't know if I answered your question completely. Dan, feel free if I didn't to.
While we're on this topic of change, I want to jump down here to Drew because he's got a question on managing change. And then we're going to come back to Jenna and close out with just some positive aspects, a positive mindset around help. But Drew, why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Courtney, thank you so much for what you're saying. It's a duality thing. And I want to emphasize what Mike said. I appreciate your be still comment. My wife and my youngest son both have on their arm the quote, be still. And I think it's indicative of me, not probably of what I was going through at that point in time, and them being calm and knowing that things were going to happen the way they happen. But I say it that way because I think as you look at change, especially in government services, nonprofits in general have a perception and the reality of this stovepiping of you have to follow process and procedures that are counterproductive to the intent of driving success, customer experience. And I think you hit the nail on the head. But there's a problem here because I think as a change agent, and as most of the people in here are change agents, go down this road, the be still comment goes away, because in order to create the change, you really have to drive it to a point where people want change until they have to change. And organizations really struggle with that. And then as a leader, I think you struggle with that. So how do you manage this cultural issue that you are experiencing right now? And what are some of the friction points that you are having personally and professionally in balancing this be still and this cultural change that you're trying to produce?
Yeah, just have to bring people into it. So I bring them into it and invite them to sit in the uncomfortable, to help to design the future, try to identify the pieces that make them uncomfortable and see how we can possibly, address those or affect change around those items. But you're right, especially when you are not just changing, but transforming. It's easy to get consumed and overwhelmed and tired and run out of gas. And so what I have tried to do with my team, and I have to say, there was a little disruption for me in this process. So I took them off site last July, and we went through this process to say, okay, dump all the goals and all the things that we've got to accomplish. If we're going to achieve this goal over here, what are all the things we have to do to make it happen? So dumped them all on the whiteboard, right? And then we broke it up into 30, 60, 90, 120, and so on day models, so that people can't get so overwhelmed when you're influencing and affecting big change. If you can put it in bite-sized nuggets for people, then it becomes more digestible. So we put together a Gantt chart, and we're only focusing on these things for the next 30 days. And once we accomplish that, we're moving on to these things. And we have check-in points to say, okay, does this still make sense? Does this timeline still make sense? And that gives people clarity, because people that are challenged with change and that they need more structure and they need more certainty and what to expect in their days and so forth, that helps them calm, saying, okay, here's what I'm expected to do. Here's what I've got to focus on. And then we turn that into an accountability dashboard. So we have an agency dashboard that all staff are responsible for these 4 goals. And then each department has 5 goals that they are to achieve and attain throughout the year. And I have my own, but we started that process last July. And then I had some disruption in my life with my husband's illness that kind of took us off track a little bit with that. So, but we just just sent our finalized dashboard to our team yesterday. So, and your workplace culture is important too. So the other thing that we do, Drew, is, and I'd be happy to send this to anybody, we have a workplace culture commitment, and it is my commitment to you. It's your commitment to me. It's the cover of our employee handbook, and it's a fun looking document. I mean, like, one of the biggest chunks of space on that cover is have fun. There's another phrase that says share your popcorn. We're constant learners. We give ourselves grace and others grace. I mean, it says things like that help remind people that this is a journey. It's not a destination. You don't just achieve your goal and then you're done, or you don't just become a leader and then you're done. It is a constant evolution and a journey, and we're on it together.
The 2 Mikes on here, Carol and others on here, their work full time is with people finding the courage to come ask for help in different ways and in different arenas. But it's hard for people to ask for help. And I thought Jenna had just an incredibly positive mindset approach to help that I want to make sure she shared for people that might listen to this later to hear. So Jenna, would you talk about what you wrote on here?
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate, and my best friend is actually a mental health therapist. She works in Las Vegas, so she's seen everything. She's been through it, but having her perspective over the course of the last 10 years of our friendship has been fantastic. And when I think about therapy, I'm in therapy. People are like, wait, you have it all together. What do you mean you're in therapy? And I tell people all the time, therapy is not for people who are broken or have had trauma or whatever. It's for anybody who wants to see the best version of themselves. We've all been through something in our life. And one of the jargons that I picked up from her a long time ago is big T versus little t traumas. We all have little t traumas. Hate to tell you guys, somebody cutting you off in traffic can be a little t trauma. Somebody being in a car accident, or divorce of parents, or a breakup. Those are all things that we don't think about as big traumas, but they can be based on, your own experience. And we all have to figure out how to use those. So having somebody who knows the tools to be able to actually help you process is the best thing ever. And I think that if more people thought about seeing the best version of themselves, that we'd get rid of the stigma of therapy. And I actually have a hoodie. My best friend started her own business of Your Mental Health is Showing is the name of the company. And it's a hoodie that has that on it. And it's because the end of it is, and it's okay. We all have days. We all have moments where we have to say, hey, take a break. We all have a second where we're like, man, I've got to walk, like Courtney, like you said earlier, like sometimes you're just like, hey, I'm sorry, my energy's off today. And we should all be okay with that. Like it's life. We're all humans. We're not robots. So that's just how I've always kind of looked at therapy and asking for help. So I'm very fortunate in that way.
I love that. Thanks for sharing that, Jenna. And one thing that you mentioned just sparked a thought in me just to share. So having last year experienced multiple traumas in my life, from losing two friends and one family member who passed away between February and May. And then my husband was diagnosed with a very rare and aggressive nasal cancer last year and had 3 surgeries and 31 radiation treatments and 2 high-dose chemo treatments and a number of other things in between. I decided I wanted to help other people that are standing in this space too. And one of the ways that I describe it is, never in all of my life have I felt more supported yet more alone. Never in all of my life have I felt more seen yet more invisible. And when you are experiencing big things like that, it's hard to put into words exactly how you're feeling and where you are. And I decided to write a book, and I made the public statement that I was doing this in January, mostly to hold myself accountable to it, because we are all, as I mentioned before, addicted to busy. And I don't want to be too busy for this, because I need it and the world needs it, and people need to understand that the book is called Everybody's Healing from Something. And I'm writing an adult version and a children's version. And I want people to have a better understanding, as you put it so well, Jenna, that there's little t and big T trauma, and every single person that you encounter is healing from something. And I want children to be able to acknowledge and see that in each other too, and understand that it's okay. It's okay to be different. Different is, and you're not different, because everybody's healing from something. But I think for children in particular, when they see something different on the outside, or when they're told something is different in a child's life, their brains aren't yet at a place that they can process that those differences can be positive. They just see it as different, and there's an association that different may not be positive. And how do we help them to become, it's about empathy. How do we all show up as, more empathetic and more as our authentic selves, because that is the greatest gift that we give ourselves and give others.
It's a great conversation. Let's close out with a comment that Mike made here. Your marketing for your upcoming event is stellar. So talk about your upcoming event and how people can support you and the work at Newhouse.
Thanks so much for saying that. I haven't even looked in the chat yet, so I will do that. But we have our first ever pop-up bar on Friday night and Saturday night, so 5 to 10 both nights at the Firehouse KC. Carolyn is one of our celebrity bartenders. We've got 26 amazing folks in our community who are going to be serving it up for folks who want to be a part of sending this message that all people are worthy of love, worthy of healthy relationships, worthy to live a life free of domestic violence. So this is our fundraiser time for people who have been stuck at home and really haven't been able to be social, to be a part of a way to give back and show survivors that they're worthy. If you're interested in getting involved, we'd love to have you come and volunteer at the shelter. We're going to be accepting new volunteers in May. Our new volunteer manager is starting in April, so we want to give her a hot minute to get settled in and to build some new strategies for us and our new vision. We also have a gala in November, and it's November 12th this year. at the Lowe's Hotel. Last year was our most successful in the organization's history. And I have to say, one of the most impactful experiences of my life. At the end of the event, we said, anybody, there were 700 people in the room, anybody who has experienced domestic violence or has a loved one who has experienced domestic violence, we invite you to stand up with survivors. And about 100 people swarmed the stage. People stood in their spaces if they didn't feel comfortable going to the stage. And again, just emphasizes the number of people in our community. We could fill the Chiefs Stadium, I think it's like 26 times over, with the number of survivors who are right here in this community that we all call home. So follow our Facebook page, our social media. We have an Amazon wish list. You know, every time survivors walk in the door, the majority of them are coming to us with the clothes on their backs and the shoes on their feet. And we have to provide for them all of their basic toiletry items, clothing, food, 3 hot meals a day, gift cards, transportation. So there are ways that people can get involved through our Amazon wish list, making a monthly donation, $5 a month, provide snacks to kids at night before they go to bed. $5 a month does that. So love for you to learn more. Anybody want to get together and come and take a tour? I'd love to show you our work in action. So reach out. My email is very simple. It's Courtney@newhousekc.org. And I'd love to talk with you more. It's really been a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Randy, so much for this opportunity.
Well, this has been fantastic. And you shared so many great insights and so much inspiration that I know is going to be great for all of us and helpful for all of us. So appreciate your authenticity and your care for others and the love you share with your community.
Well, thank you, Randy. Everybody have a great day. It's so nice to see your faces this morning. Bye.
Everybody have a good weekend. Bye.